6 practices down, 6 practices to go. We are at the halfway mark of Buffalo Bills training camp at St. John Fisher. I'm Kevin Carroll. Welcome to the Buffalo End Zone podcast. A lot to get to.
And I'm Andy Young. We've seen some highs, some lows from training camp, some injuries starting to pile up, but some splash plays as well from some of the guys. So there's a lot going on out at Fisher. As we record this on an off day, I didn't take the day off. I'm here for you with Buffalo End Zone.
No days off. No days off. I believe that was Bill Belichick a few years ago. Andy, the focus, of course, has been certain position battles going into this. You know, we addressed them before training camp started. After the first 3 days, we addressed early what we were seeing at some of these position battles. But now I think we're in the thick of it right now, because what you got coming up is you got the Bills' big practice at Highmark Stadium, then a few more practices out at St. John Fisher, and then the preseason starts. And then we're into a whole new level of where these position battles are and what certain players have to do in order to make the 53-man roster when all is said and done going into the regular season. The big one, of course, is wide receiver, and a number of topics to get to when we talk about this, but the heat picking up in recent days, and I want you to maybe dive into this. Tyrell Shavers. A lot of talk around him. Not one of the big names going, not someone you and I even remotely brought up as someone who had a shot at making the team, but his name getting a lot of buzz, and you're hearing from coaches and other players on how impressed they are with this young man.
Yeah, I had the chance to talk with Tyrell Shavers the other day at training camp, and he said, look, I am just trying to take advantage of every opportunity that I get. A lot of guys counted me out. I bounced around to 3 different schools during college. I was an undrafted free agent, spent last season on the practice squad, and I'm just trying to make the most of every chance that I get out there. And he has had plenty of chances with Josh Allen and the first-team offense. They rotate guys in. It's not just the same 3 or 4 guys every play. Few different guys get a chance, but Shavers has really impressed. He's consistent, and that's one thing Sean McDermott said when I asked him what he liked about Tyrell Shavers after we noticed he was getting more run, and McDermott told me, if you look in the dictionary, Tyrell Shavers is there as the definition of consistency. He just goes about his business, knows the playbook, knows what he's supposed to do, and he shows up. He makes catches. You don't see him with a lot of drops. You see him really building a rapport with Allen, and that's really interesting given that he spent last season on the practice squad and wasn't one of the more heralded players coming into this training camp wide receiver battle when we have all these new guys and we're kind of trying to figure out what the hierarchy is there. I mean, he right now, I think, has just as good a chance to make the team or better than a guy like KJ Hamler, than a guy like MVS, than a guy like Chase Claypool, who's hurt right now. So, I mean, there's a really good chance. Hamler, I don't want to go there because he hasn't played as much with the first team. However, he probably will get some chances at returner. So I think his role might be a little different. But, I mean, right now he's done a little bit more as far as consistency and splash plays than an MVS or a Claypool.
Yeah, and
Marquez Valdez-Scantling.
I think it's interesting. Like, even Deion Dawkins is noticing Shavers. Like, he spoke about what the young man's been doing at training camp as well. So you're getting attention in a good way.
Joe Brady talked about him. I mean, yeah, he's just doing what he's supposed to do out there. And every day you notice him, right? Like, you notice Samuel, you notice Shakir, you notice Keon Coleman. Mack Hollins, to a degree, too, has done some nice things. And then right in after that, you notice Tyrell Shavers.
You mentioned MVS and Chase Claypool, 2 different situations for those guys there, but those were the names that caught people's attention during the offseason, that they were going to be on the roster. And we even talked about going into camp that both of them kind of looked like a lock. I think I hinted that one of them might not make it, but we'll see how things play out. Claypool, as you mentioned, injured. And then Marquez Valdez-Scantling, I believe it was Brady the other day, mentioned him working more with some of the younger guys, getting used to the routes and the playbook and stuff like that, which to the average person sitting at home seems like, okay, that translates to something's not working out. That those other Keon Coleman isn't over, or is he? You're out there. But Keon Coleman doesn't get mentioned in the same breath as a veteran working out with some of the younger guys, getting used to some of the routes and whatnot.
No, and I hesitate to make any grand proclamations. We're talking about what, like, I'm seeing as the untrained eye. Like, I watch a lot of football, but I'm not a coach or a scout or somebody in the front office, so I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, this guy's a lock, this guy's, definitely performing better. We don't know what's being asked of these guys. But MVS, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, has not shown a ton as far as, like, noticeable plays. Mm-hmm. He has, however, in the last couple of days picked it up a little bit. And it's a long training camp. Then you got 3 preseason games, and he's just getting acclimated to a new offense. You're right about that. Yeah, Coleman's a different kind of player, right? Like, Coleman is basically a first-round pick to them. So that's different than bringing in, veteran free agent Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who's had success, has not been a star in this league by any means. He's just been on some very good teams, had some very good quarterbacks, and he's made plays. Don't get me wrong there. So I hesitate to say, like, he's on the outside looking in or anything right now or on the bubble, but, he hasn't popped off the page at all.
Mack Hollins, you mentioned him just a little bit ago. Noticeable with plays he made, and, of course, as a character, picking up that becoming a fan favorite with the hair, with the no shoes, with eating with no utensils. You hear the word modern-day Tarzan mentioned a few times with the general fan base so he's turning heads both with his when you get to Bills camp, he stands out, obviously, with the hair flowing out of his helmet and the ripped up jersey at the end. So as a fan who might not be on the outskirts of, not a diehard, but let's go to training camp and checks, he catches everyone's attention, and then his backstory becomes big, and then you get feature stories on him, and now he's someone that everyone's interested in seeing, and it's a pretty wild story on how he got to where he is. And like you said, you mentioned when we were getting ready for camp that you think he's a roster lock because of his special teams ability. Just generally someone that you're just curious about the entire time to know what's going on with this dude.
And to toot my own horn, I did the featured story on him.
You were first, right?
In the spring about the no shoes, the no utensils, the wild hair, all the charity work he does with Special Olympics and different organizations. He's just an interesting dude. He has really caught the attention of the media and fans at training camp. He's loud, like you hear him. Mm-hmm. He's one of those guys that's shouting on the practice field. He'll catch a pass, and he's yelling back to Josh Allen, or he's yelling to the defensive back that was covering him. Just an interesting character. The ripped up shirt thing is cool. He looks like an 80s rocker or something.
He does.
Right? Yeah, a little bit.
Little hairband basis.
He said he started doing that because it doesn't get as wet. At one point, when you wear like a T-shirt and you're in training camp in the hot summer sun, now it's kind of like his signature. He tapes his toes. He talked about when he had an injury and he started training barefoot because he got with some guys from Australia who train and work out barefoot, and then it just translated to the rest of his life. And he's just a different cat. He's unabashedly proud to be kind of a different dude. He hates house cats, by the way, so I don't even want to call him a different cat. He thinks house cats will steal your soul.
And his mindset is kind of catching on. Joe Brady, early in camp, the new OC, out there in bare feet.
Yeah, and he also Joe Brady wears his fair share of Air Jordan 1 lows. That's one of my favorites too.
We know. Yeah, you got him on.
I got him on today, right? Yeah, he's just a magnanimous character, and he's playing well on the field too. He's a guy that has made a lot of plays. You see him make like some deep in cuts, and Josh will hit him there. And he's got prowess in the special teams game, as you mentioned. He's a blocker. He's a guy that between he and Keon Coleman kind of fit that X receiver role, and you'll see them both on the field at times. So, he's doing a nice job. I've thought he was a lock since the spring, just what I saw out of him.
Two big questions. One, he calls shoes prisons for your feet. So one has to wonder how that translates to being forced to wear them when you're playing the game. The other one is that I've been asked, and I don't have the answer. I think I have the answer, that he said his lifestyle is barefoot all the time. He's been, in Miami and Las Vegas. You got the Buffalo Winters coming up.
I'm curious to see how that goes.
Did he say anything about that?
It's funny. I haven't heard anything about that yet, but we'll ask him. He attended some Bills players went to my children's elementary school here in the Buffalo area and presented, and he's new, so nobody really knew who he was, but he walks in with no shoes, the big hair, and they were doing a reptile deal, and he's into reptiles, so he's got this huge snake around his shoulders.
Of course he does.
Right, so that's interesting. That was in the spring, and the weather was decent then, but does he walk around barefoot in the winter? I don't know.
It'll be interesting to see.
Who knew that Mack Hollins was going to be the thing we spend the most time on this podcast talking about, when all the things that are going on. He's just an interesting character.
Right. I mean, you can't get away from both on the field and off the field stuff and where he's at in his career and here with the Bills. The big guy, though, Andy, of course, is Keon Coleman, the rookie coming in, 33rd draft pick overall. I find it interesting days or on a day after practice to get what national people are saying about Keon Coleman against what you get from people like yourself who are out there every day seeing what's going on. Initially, you hear he's a rookie, he's struggling getting used to the NFL game. Not really the case from the first impression. Later, you see that he's a lock to start, but he's a rookie. He has an adjustment period. Again, these are just practice. We have to see how he is during games, but so far so good through 6 practices on what you're getting out of the first player you drafted this year.
I've got to be honest with you. I don't really know where those reports are coming from. Like, I've seen some random reports from things that are not reputable, on X.
Right.
And, where's this stuff coming from?
So where are they getting that information?
Right.
People who aren't there.
Is someone at camp watching it and reporting that to them? Are they reporting that? I don't get it.
Yeah.
So, I've been there every single day. I've watched every single rep of 11 on 11. Almost every individual drill, almost every 7 on 7, all that stuff. Keon's been good for the most part. He's made some mistakes. He's had some drops. I think he had a fumble at one point, or a drop that some people thought was a fumble. But he just stands out. He's a guy who makes plays. He had an awesome one-on-one battle with Kaiir Elam the other day, and Elam's a physical big guy and gets his hands on you. Mm-hmm. And Keon won a couple of those reps. He goes up high and gets the football. He just makes plays. I haven't seen insane separation from him, like a Diggs who would make a move and then the guy is laying on the ground 10 yards behind him. That's not his game. It's never going to be, I don't think. But he's a physical specimen. He's athletic. He just seems to know how to get the ball. It's almost like a post player or a wing in basketball. And that makes sense because he's a former college basketball player, right? He's never going to be the, make you miss in a box kind of guy. He's more of a physical guy, and so far so good. Has he been just the most unbelievable player you've ever seen? No, but I think he's been pretty good for a rookie, and he gets plenty of run with Allen, and I think he plays in a lot of different positions. They've moved him around to the slot. They have him outside. I think he's doing just fine, and I think he's going to be a part of what they do. Is he going to go for 1,200 yards and 10 touchdowns his rookie year? I don't know, but I think he's going to be a part of their offense, and it's an important piece.
Samuel and Shakir, right now as we stand, slotted into what they're going to be as far as starters in the offense or where they're going to be in the offense once the regular season gets underway. We've seen enough.
Yeah, Shakir is steady as he goes. He's picked up right where he left off. You're going to see him mostly in the slot. Obviously, he can play some other stuff, but his best spot is in the slot. That's what we've seen so far during training camp. Now, mind you, we're allowed to report on this stuff now, like what positions people are playing and first-team reps, because these practices are open to the public. Once they leave Fisher, we can't talk about that anymore as media. It's part of our policy. So we got to kind of skirt around that sort of stuff. You get the picture. Josh Allen had a nice pass to Khalil Shakir. That means you can figure that out, right?
Yeah.
But Shakir has been really steady. He's had a lot of nice plays. Josh finds him in the seam. They did a 2-minute drill the other day, and he hit back-to-back passes to Shakir for first downs. He's just going to be a guy that's really counted on there. And Samuel's been really good too. I think Samuel might be the most consistent wide receiver we've seen of that bunch. And he just does so many different things. They line him up in the backfield sometimes.
I saw that the other day. I was like, why is...
Well, he's a former running back.
Yeah.
And Brady used him at times that way when Brady was his offensive coordinator in Carolina too. So not quite the same player as Deebo Samuel, who does that sort of thing too, but he's a versatile guy who can run the ball if called upon. If they want to spread people out and then move him into the backfield and then run the football with him, they can, because he's a former running back. They're comfortable with that. He's just really good. He's got quickness. He's got some speed. He finds a way to get open. Allen looks for him. You've seen a lot of like deep crossers and things like that have really connected. And I think Samuel has a good chance. We've talked a lot about Dalton Kincaid maybe leading this team in catches. I think Samuel has a good chance too.
Good chemistry then with his pass catchers, Josh Allen right now. Connor McGovern now the center for the Bills right now. Some issues at time out of training camp as far as the center quarterback exchange goes.
Yeah, the very first day, I don't know if you remember, Kevin, when the offense just tore it up, right? They started in 11-on-11 with red zone drills, and the offense was basically scoring at will. And I noticed, and I mentioned it to a couple of our colleagues on the sidelines, media members, that some of the snaps are low. Like Josh is picking them off his feet, off his shoelaces, or they're just barely getting to him, but he would still make the play. And that's kind of continued at times throughout the first 6 practices. And then one of the days he had they were under center, he and Connor McGovern, and fumbled exchange. And there's just a little bit of issue there. And Joe Brady said, look, it is, he was asked if that's concerning, if that's an issue. He said, yeah, you don't want to see that, right? But now is the time for those two guys to work that out. And I mentioned, I think in our Buffalo End Zone training camp preview special, that Connor McGovern was my player to watch.
That's why I'm asking you. You're watching him.
Right, and more so not because like the guy can't block and play center. It's how is he going to get the exchange with Allen? Where does he like the snaps? That sort of thing, because McGovern says he's a natural center and he played it coming up all through, and but in the NFL he's only played guard. So it's been 4 or 5 years since he played center, going back to Penn State days and high school days before that. So it's something to monitor. It's something they've got to work through. I'm not like overly concerned, but it is noticeable that there are some low snaps and some less than optimum exchanges between those two.
Still got a month to work on it.
There's time. There's time here.
Let's talk safety, Andy. We talk about injuries at wide receiver to Chase Claypool. The safety unit, the other big battle, or one of the big battles that we wanted to keep an eye on going into training camp, is dealing with their fair share of injuries. Mike Edwards battling injury all offseason, now battling injury during training camp. That's never a good thing. And now Cole Bishop, the rookie that a lot is expected of him down the road, gets banged up during training camp.
Yeah, you know what? It's unfortunate for the Bills right now, and it's unfortunate for Mike Edwards, because Sean McDermott basically said that they were penciling him in to be their top guy going into the spring, along with Taylor Rapp. And he's never really been able to get much traction of being on the field. He missed basically all of practice during OTAs and minicamp, recovering from off-season surgery. Then he gets to training camp, gets started, and then has a hamstring injury. And he's going to be out week to week. So he's never really gained any sort of foothold. He was taking some reps with the ones in rotation with Damar Hamlin and Cole Bishop prior to that. but that's really problematic for a guy coming in learning a new system. The safety is one of the tougher positions in football to learn from a mental standpoint. McDermott said basically it's quarterback, middle linebacker, and safety are the three toughest from a mental learning, classroom communication standpoint to take on. And he was talking about more Bishop there, but that's got to be the same for Edwards. Although he's a vet, it's a new system for him and a new place. So he's never really gotten off the ground. So then, okay, Damar Hamlin has been taking a lot of reps, and he's played pretty well. And I talked with him and did a little piece on him this past week, and he said, look, I am effing starving to prove myself, right, to move past everything that happened with him and his cardiac arrest.
Well, that's the thing. It's like this time last year when it comes to Damar, we looked at it as it's just great to see him out there. It's just great to see him in pads. It's just great to see he made a tackle. It's just great to see this. It's great to see that. And I'm sure for the rest of his life, he will always have this in the back of his mind. But he legit seems like enough of that. I want to be a starter in the NFL. The window is open now with these injuries because now the three we're rotating through, now it's just Damar. We look at Rapp as he's locked into place already.
Yes.
So now Damar has this huge opportunity in front of him to make a case for a guy who before his injury stepped in and played well at the safety position.
Yeah, Damar before that incident in Cincinnati had been playing well. I mean, he wasn't perfect. I think he was in his second season then, but he was doing okay, and it was kind of manning that area back there with Micah Hyde out at the time, and then Jaquan Johnson was in too. That was when Poyer and Hyde both kind of were hurt, and Damar, I mean, he's got a mindset of like, look, last year was tough. Think about trying to come back and do something that basically killed you, right? Without the medical intervention of the medical team, we're not talking.
He's dead.
It's a different story. He died on the field and was brought back to life, right? And so just imagine going through that mentally. I'm going back to do what almost just killed me.
Didn't he say that to you during your interview with him? That
he did.
What type of person goes back to do something that they did that killed them?
Right. That was his quote.
Oh, okay.
It was close to that. We're paraphrasing, but it was basically the quote.
Yeah.
And he said, I had to get through that. It was emotional every step of the way. So, like, my preface in the story was like, all right, it was the first day of pads. Last year at this time, it was like, oh, Damar's putting on the pads for the first time. How is he going to deal with the hitting and all that sort of thing? And like you mentioned, every one of those things was a milestone on his journey to get back into football. Yeah. Every little thing that he did was like, all right, I'm doing this for the first time since that. Now that's all behind him, and he's totally locked in. So that's a great story, and we'll see if that continues. Bishop, on the other hand, I kind of glossed over him. That's really tough. He had a tough road, I think, of like being a starter right away. But that chance opened up a little more when Edwards was banged up, and then he was getting some first-team reps too. And then to see him go out of practice, and a couple of our colleagues reported they saw him with a wrapped-up arm later that day. We'll see how long he's out.
Is it wrong for me to say it's better the arm than the lower body injury?
It's hard to say. It depends. Like, you got to have your arms if you're like.
Poyer had that big contraption.
Right, but he missed some time with it, too.
I know, he did.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you can just lock it up, but can you wrap guys up, that sort of thing?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Who was the Packers wide receiver who played with a broken arm? And I think it was Freeman or something like that. But, yeah, back to Damar real quick. I'm glad he's having the camp he is. Offline, you and I were talking one day, and I said, I don't know. Make a wild comment. I don't know. Damar's not going to make the opening day roster.
Yeah.
And that did cross my mind at one point. Like, it might just be time for them to move on. But it's really cool to see what he's doing.
I mean, I would have said before all those injuries in camp that the way things were going, he was shaping up to be either the starter or the third guy. And now, I mean, if these guys are out for a long time, that's opening the door for him definitely to have a chance to start. So it's remarkable, but this guy has put in the work and the time to get to this point. Sean McDermott said he's just playing focused. He's playing consistently. That's awesome to see. I mean, who could blame the guy if he never even played football again? And here we go.
Right.
Good for him. And he doesn't want to talk about that anymore, really. Like, he does, but he doesn't. You can tell, like, I want to move forward.
Yeah.
I think it's important. It'll never be not a part of his life. I mean, think about all the things that have happened since.
And all the charity work.
Right.
And
And,
all that other stuff.
some of the things he's been able to do because of what happened.
Yeah.
But he wants to prove that he's an NFL football player and a starter in this league.
I get it. I totally get it. Speaking of comebacks, you got Von Miller, Andy. That was one of the big questions when you look at the pass rush, is where he's going to be. And it seems like as training camp rolls along, Von Miller is inching forward to what Bills Mafia is out there hoping. Can we just get classic Von Miller back to help us get to the promised land this year? And now you're starting to see glimpses that, okay, we might be there.
I don't think you're going to get like classic Von Miller from 10 years ago. But
Right.
But if you can get 8 to 10 sacks out of that guy, that would be huge. I had mentioned that I hadn't seen a ton of him doing anything spectacular or noticeable. He just kind of was there the first few days. He had a veteran rest day on the first day they wore pads.
Mm-hmm.
So yesterday was his first day in pads. He practiced, and he was noticeable. It was the best I'd seen him look in practice
All right.
in ages. I saw him get around the edge. I saw some of that classic bend, that torque where he gets so low to the ground. And
Didn't see that last year.
no. And I saw some signs of that. I think he had a few would-be sacks where they would have blown the whistle, or they did blow the whistle in practice where he could have got to the guy. There was one play where he kind of got around Spencer Brown. Josh Allen was flushed out, and it's one of those classic times where Von would come back and use his athleticism and speed. He probably would have been able to track down the quarterback, maybe if his name isn't Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson.
Right.
Pretty much anybody else, right? So I that was really promising. We talked to Deion Dawkins after practice, and Deion's a man of words, right?
Yeah.
And he said, Von is Von, 40 is back. Just let the story play out. You'll see.
And he's out there with
he's
him.
out there and presumably blocking him sometimes. Right? So, I mean, if they can get any semblance of what Von Miller was prior to the injury, remember, he had, I think, 8 or 8.5 sacks prior to tearing his ACL on Thanksgiving 2022.
Yep.
If they can get anything like that and get him in that 8 to 10 sack range, that's huge because they don't have anybody else in that spot. Like, yeah, you hope Greg Rousseau gets there, and he's looked really good, by the way, in training camp.
Mm-hmm.
Is he going to take that next step? Is Epinesa? You don't have Leonard Floyd anymore, who was your top outside sack guy.
How about Smoot?
Yeah, Dewan Smoot has been pretty good, too. I mean, he's been getting plenty of run. I'd probably say those are your top 4 right now.
Yeah.
But I also think Kingsley Jonathan's going to have something to say about it. Casey Toohill, Cameron Klein, Javon Solomon, the rookie. They've got a lot of decisions to make outside of the top probably 3 or 4. Are they going to keep 5? Are they going to keep 6? I mean, where are those guys going, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's a host of names on the back end of that defensive end edge rusher group that you wonder who's gonna get the axe at the end of this.
We have Ed Oliver, Daquan Jones, of course, defensive tackles.
Yep, looking
They're
good.
They're in place.
Yep, they're fine, doing their thing.
Question is, what's behind them? We know they like to do the rotation throughout the game, keep bodies fresh. Who behind them, has anyone caught your attention at all?
I think Dwayne Carter, the rookie, 3rd-round pick, has been nice. Former 3-year captain at Duke, kind of one of those leadership Kyle Williams type guys, which is high motor all the time, always says the right things, going to be in the right place, smart, went to Duke. I've liked what I've seen from him. He's flashed a little bit. I think Austin Johnson's going to have some play there. So there's different guys. You get like Ilianku, who's been around for a long time. One thing that's interesting, too, that they've done quite a bit, and maybe this even makes the door for Smoot open a little wider, is they've moved him inside to tackle.
They love that. Player flexibility, Andy.
Right. So maybe you go, you bump Smoot inside with Ed Oliver. We've seen that a couple of times in pass rush situations, and then you have, Russo and Vaughn, or Russo and Epinesa, or one of the other guys. So, I mean, that's an interesting possibility too.
Cornerback battle, Kyer Elam, always a big talking point since the Bills drafted him. You mentioned earlier his one-on-one battles with Keon Coleman. We, in our pre-camp show, former Bills wide receiver Stevie Johnson expects a lot out of this dude. How's camp been going for him, especially now that there's more contact? You mentioned he's a physical guy off the line. When you're just in uppers or just shorts, you're not getting much of that, but now you get to see a bit of that competition.
Well, the problem for him has been that he might be a little too grabby, right? He uses his hands a little too much to grab the jerseys. And we saw even in those one-on-one battles with Coleman, he had good defense, and it was on a goal line drill, one-on-one, and Coleman slipped to the ground, and the referee threw a flag. And then there was another time in 11-on-11 where Coleman and he were stride for stride deep down the field. Coleman just pulled away at the very end, and Kyer reached out and grabbed him. Flag, right? Pass interference.
Can't be doing that.
That's kind of been the knock. However, I think for the most part, he's had a pretty good camp. He's gotten some run with the ones. He's been rotated in. I think right now he's your third corner.
Okay, that was going to be my next question. I was going to bring up Jamarcus Ingram if he had a shot, but it seems like it's playing out that Elam will get that number 3 cornerback behind Christian Benford
I'd say
and
that.
Rasul Douglas.
And then I think Ingram will be your 4th.
Okay.
And Ingram's had a nice little camp too and done some good things. I saw he had a pick the other day. He's been good. Kyer's been pretty good too. So I think if those guys are pretty good, and if especially Kyer, given he's a first-round pick, they traded up to get him. Say Douglas gets banged up. Say Benford gets banged up. That guy's got to go in and play. I mean, you need him to be good. They've been thin at corner. Like after the first 2 guys, somebody gets banged up every year, it seems.
They
don't have Dane Jackson to rely on, who stepped in and was reliable in that spot.
Every year, the last few years, it seems like you're going deeper into that cornerback room as the season rolls along.
They say you can never have enough good corners, and that's going to be tested.
They do say that. They also say that there's a new kick return rule in place this year, Andy. I'm just throwing this out there. Is there any idea of what they're looking at as guys who could possibly be the kick returner that would give us an inkling of how we might think they plan on approaching this new kickoff?
I've watched the kickoffs, and I want to stop short of like saying exactly how the formations look or anything like that, because the Bills have asked us not to shoot practice during that time.
Right.
Because it's new to every team. They don't want to give that away, so I don't want to give away how they're lining up or anything like that. But they've had a host of guys back there trying it. One guy I don't think you're probably going to see a ton of is Shakir.
Well, that's why I bring it up,
because he's going to be like a starter on offense. You're probably not going to see a lot of that.
Right, yeah, and that's kind of why I brought it up was, during the offseason, you keep it out. You heard Shakir's name. I even heard Keon Coleman as a possible.
No. I mean, Ty Johnson was doing some stuff before he got hurt. You got KJ Hamler, who I think has a decent shot in the return game. You've seen Ray Davis, the rookie running back there. You've seen a couple of different guys. Andy Isabella.
Haven't heard Andy Isabella's name mentioned.
Right. I think he's got a tough road ahead to make this team, just given where things stand. Daquan Hardy, who's a rookie cornerback who's done a lot of punt returning in his career and kick returning at Penn State. He's been in the mix too. So I couldn't say right now that anyone's a favorite to me.
Right.
But I'm just mentioning a few guys we've seen back there doing it.
Yeah. All right. Now with the pads on, we get more of the battles that you see out there. As we've said, Keon Coleman, Kyer Elam, you get to watch the fun that is the battles between the wide receivers and the cornerbacks this time of year. And to me, that's always been the most interesting thing. I know a lot of people like seeing the linemen clash, but just you get a better feel now of what certain players are like on both the cornerback side and the wide receiver side when you can start mixing it up a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's real football, right? It's a true test. Now, they're not like full tackling each other. Sometimes it happens by accident. It's more of thud, or you kind of wrap and let go, that sort of thing. You don't want to take guys down. Like we saw Ty Johnson get knocked down and then he's hurt, right?
Yeah.
And he's been out. And that he's a guy that was probably your backup running back, or at least in the mix there. But, yeah, you're right. Like the offensive linemen, you kind of watch some of those one-on-one drills between the O-line and the D-line, and just that level of physicality, that intensity, it really ratchets up what camp is. Because otherwise it's basically like flag football in a way, right? They're with helmets on. When they put the full pads on, like guys are popping, guys are hitting, and you've got to get used to some of that just because of the nature of the game. They've done a good job, the NFL and the Bills and sports science and all those sorts of things, of kind of like figuring out how best to optimize that and not beat up the players. But you still got to get used to that. Like you can't go out in the first game and like crack somebody. Like you got it. You're like, holy crap, right? Like, especially at that speed. Like you've been on the sidelines for practice or for an NFL game. It's insane. It is insane how fast these guys are and how hard they're hitting. It's incredible to me that more people aren't hurt.
You're on the sidelines as part of our job at certain times in your career as someone who's shooting the games, and you're down there, and at certain fields you had to be on your knees. I don't know if the Bills still make you do that because of the view from the stands. But, oh, my gosh, you get a hit by the sidelines by you. It is so crazy. The sound you hear, the force in which it comes in, the speed of the game is ridiculous.
Like, think about these, like, linebackers or whoever that are 240 pounds, 250 pounds, and running in the 4.4s or 4.3s and just crashing into other people. It's a sport that, like,
I can't remember who it was, but I think it was Donald Jones way back in the day. I think he came over the middle, and Vince Wilfork for the Patriots kind of backed off the line. And Vince Wilfork is a huge dude. Donald Jones, not. He lit him up so bad. I mean, it was one of the craziest hits I've ever seen. Why Vince Wilfork was 5 yards back while Donald Jones was crossing the field, I'm sure no one planned on him.
Zone blitz by Bill Belichick, right? Remember our good buddy, former colleague here at Spectrum News, George Bloss, who works for the Bills now.
Oh, right.
He used to be our shooter for games. He was the cameraman on the sidelines. He'd have his knee pads on, and that was back when they made the photographers kneel. And he got absolutely crushed in the back of the end zone by Darren McFadden of the Raiders.
I know.
And there's a picture of him, and you just see George was on his knees, but his body being launched. Someone got a picture of it.
Yep.
And, like, he didn't have pads on, right?
And the camera was broken half.
Right. That's the force that this guy came in with. Incredible. He said something like, "You good, baby?" George will always tell that story. So shout out to George if you're listening.
I was told George wasn't allowed to drive home after that hit. He would not give me the keys to the car because I was the one up in the press box shooting it. He was adamant he was going to drive home. I'm like, you just can't.
Right.
I will stand in front of the car. You got hit by an NFL player without any protection on. Take a break.
Right. Story time here at Spectrum News.
We'll keep it going, Andy, with a little 3 and out here. The players in pads. A lot of the guys mentioned that it's always a special day to put the pads on, either when you're Pop Warner, high school, college, all the way up into the pros. There are players that who said this the other morning? It was Ed Oliver said that there are these guys on offense that talk a big game about, I can't wait to put the pads on to start hitting, and it's all show. They're just hoping they're going to be okay. I played offense in high school. Everyone plays both sides of the ball, but I hated playing defense. So I never even tried when I was playing safety, so I wouldn't have to go in and play defense and just focus on playing wide receiver.
That was back in the days when they would put like a fast kid but that didn't like contact back at safety and just like
correct.
Yeah, hope he could make a play once in a while.
Yeah, maybe he can run someone down who gets by. By the second game of the season, my senior year in high school, I got burnt twice for touchdowns, like 50-yard touchdowns. And I just walked off the field. I never saw another down on defense ever again. But I love playing offense, and I love getting hit. And it was just, it's right. No matter what level you're at, you put on the jersey, you put on your pants, your helmet, you go out there and you play real football. It's such a cool day.
It is. It's also like, for me, when I played like junior high and high school football, it was kind of a nerve-wracking day too.
Mm-hmm.
Because leading into that, you're doing 2-a-days and it's conditioning, and that sucks. Like that was not fun either. And you're doing install of your schemes.
Hated that. Just standing in the sun.
But then they'd do stuff back in the day like where you weren't allowed to have water for the whole practice.
It's
wild.
What
are we doing? What are we doing here, guys? Like,
Andy, we used to have this thing called the gauntlet where you basically kick the crap out of each other for a half an hour.
You do those like Nebraska drills where you'd lay on your back and one guy would have the ball and the other guy would not have a ball, but then you'd have to spin off your back and then crash into each other at 100 miles an hour.
There's that scene from the movie The Program from back in the 90s where they're doing those drills.
Yeah.
That if you want to get a feel, they don't do them anymore, but that scene is pretty accurate on what it's like doing it and how exhausted you are after.
And the thing that made me nervous was, like, I was big, so I wasn't like, if I'm in a 2-point or 3-point stance and on the line and hitting the guy across from me, that's fine. But I was also not fast or quick. So I'd be laying on my back, and they'd put me up against, like, one of the faster running backs, or, like, we had a really good, like, a 2-time state champion wrestler who was our running back, and he was a big dude, but he was really super athletic, like alpha male kind of guy. You'd go up against him, I'd have no chance. I'm, like, on my knees trying to get up, and he's plowing into me. That sucked. I hated that. You want to put me against another fat, slow lineman, that's fine, but don't have me rolling off my back trying to get guys that are twice my speed. Like that, I hated that part of it. So, but I did enjoy, like, the actual contact, but not those kind of drills, which I think are just stupid.
Yeah.
What does that prove?
You look back
when's a defensive lineman ever laying on his back, gets up, and then the running back just happens to be there?
Right.
Come on.
Oh, back in the day. We'll play the song Glory Days over this.
And probably
post-production.
if coaches that are listening to this, you're like, I still run that, you know more than me. But
right.
But I hated those drills.
Those are I don't mind getting hit by a cornerback jumping up for a ball, but you're right. Some of the drills, some of the non-water drinking, some of the punishments, like make you run until you throw up or like stuff like that going on back in the day.
And the head injury stuff. They didn't know as much back then.
Right.
But, like, I remember I got absolutely obliterated by a kid in junior high, and I absolutely had a concussion knowing what we know now. And they're like, oh, yeah, you got your lights knocked out.
Right.
Get some water and head back in. I was like, oh, thank God you gave me water. Wow. First time I've heard that in 2 weeks.
That's how you earn water, Andy. Get the snot knocked out of you. To modern times, Andy. In the news the other day, a story of a child getting a Burger King burger in the Buffalo area, found blood on the burger. Now,
it wasn't ketchup.
Well, that was the part of the story. Was the kid said, "Mom, I said no ketchup on the burger." She opened up the bun, looked at it, and it was not ketchup. Burger King.
I'm sorry to laugh.
Burger King did the right thing, shut everything down, and now the talk is, would you go back to Burger King, or how would you have handled that? And keep in mind, Andy, I'm a skeptic about everything these days. Trust no one, trust nothing. Was it an employee's blood, or is something fishy here? Now, obviously, I'm going to lean towards the side of, something happened there.
Like they did it on purpose?
I don't know. I mean,
Was it blood from the burger, like from an uncooked patty? Like
the way the story sounds is like someone had a cut and blood dripped onto the burger.
God.
I mean, you could eat around it.
So my thing is, so many jokes, so many jokes. I probably wouldn't go back to that Burger King.
Okay, but the story doesn't sour you because we were talking. Now is probably the best time to go to Burger King because now they're under the microscope.
I've worked in a certain meat department.
Okay,
at a grocery store.
I know. I remember I saw you there once.
So it doesn't things can be grosser than you'd like to think.
I know that. My wife used to work at a certain grocery store in the butcher department and tells me she would come home covered in blood every day.
Yes. So it's sanitary, don't get me wrong there, but it just that stuff doesn't necessarily gross me out.
Yeah.
There's nothing worse than getting a hair in your food. You order takeout,
hair in the food I can't stand.
Yeah.
Like that. I was telling you the story of a buddy of mine. We found hair in potato salad. He sucked the potato salad off the hair, which is so disgusting.
And I love the way you say potato salad. Potato salad.
Potato. But holy
it.
Cow, you could not get me to eat potato salad.
Ever again?
No, I'll eat it now.
Okay.
But for years, I was like, no way, man. Oh, all right. Good talk right there.
Hey, for all you folks who tuned in to hear about what's going on at Buffalo Bills training camp, we really went off the rails.
How about the Olympics, Andy? I find myself, because we always do what you watch, we'll talk about the Olympics. Sports that I want to watch, I will watch, but you're obvious, especially when they're on right now. I mean, you're home at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the Olympics are on, you're flipping through, seeing what's on. I literally watched the entire event of women's archery over the weekend. Why? I stumbled on it and just became enthralled with the competition of it, the accuracy. The women were shooting those arrows or whatever. I guess they're arrows.
Yeah.
What's a quiver? Is that the...
That's the thing they keep them in.
Oh, okay. The arrow holder.
Yeah.
But it's amazing when the Olympics happen, some obscure sporting event you'll get suckered into watching. I know breakdancing's coming up.
Yeah. Well, that's why, back in the day, and you and I are a little older and remember this, ABC's Wide World of Sports was popular.
Oh, yeah.
It was just random, Olympic sports or, different kinds of things. And people,
Agony of defeat, Andy.
Yeah, people loved that. I caught myself watching, and I didn't even know this was in the Olympics, and that's my stupidity, but 3-on-3 basketball the other day.
Right.
I was watching women's, and I was like, oh, this is cool. I love 3-on-3 basketball. Go play in the Gus Macker tournament, right?
The Gus Macker.
Yeah.
Do they still do the Gus Macker?
They do, yeah.
I played in it twice, and I'm not a basketball player.
You hate basketball. Why did you play in the Gus Macker?
Because we wanted a team.
You hate basketball.
I know. I couldn't stand. I mean, we played with a friend of ours who was good at basketball. I just passed him the ball the entire time.
Yeah, but the Olympics are awesome. Whole family sat down and watched the U.S. women and all the hype around Simone Biles and gymnastics and winning a gold. Awesome. And then we watched swimming. My wife's a former high school and college swimmer, so we kind of locked in on that a little bit. And you're rooting for the Americans, and then they've got the rivalry with Australia. So the Olympics just captures your attention, and of course NBC does a great job of hyping it up. And this year more than ever, they've involved the celebrities a lot.
Yeah.
They've taken a note from the NFL of let's show the celebrities in the stands constantly, and Snoop Dogg's involvement is a little over the top, but people love it.
It's fun. I was just gonna say something to you, and then my phone started ringing. Hold on.
Take the call on the pod.
I don't know.
Put it on speaker.
I don't know that number, so I decided not to do it. The other good thing about the Olympics, Andy, and the fact that they're over in Paris, France, I saw an event at 3 o'clock in the morning. It was one of the swimming events. I get home, my wife and I are sitting around. The replay of the event is on. So I'm telling my wife, I think this is the woman who's going to win this event, and I think she'll win it by this amount. And sure enough.
And she's like, oh, my God, Kevin, right?
And then because I can't just let it lie like that, I tell her right away, nah, I watched that at 3 o'clock this morning already.
Your sleep schedule is the worst.
4:30 to 1 o'clock in the morning is what I've been stuck on so far this week. But hopefully things will get better. Before we head out, shout out to my niece, Megan, 16 years old now. It's crazy how time flies, Andy, with kids. I know I don't have to tell you that.
Uncle Kev going to teach her how to drive?
Oh, she doesn't want that. And my brother doesn't want that. And my dad doesn't want that. And she probably doesn't want that.
Yeah. Sweet 16. Love it. Shout out to her. Happy birthday. Hey, before we go, we do this every week. Make sure you like us, comment, subscribe, whether you're on YouTube or Facebook or wherever you're watching us or listening to us in your general podcast areas. Help us grow this thing.
Yeah, absolutely. We're back once again next week with more from Bill's Camp. We'll see you then. And as always, thanks for joining us.